Welcome to Season 2 of the Fearless Lady Podcast. I am your host, Charlene Light, and this season, I'm taking you on the greatest adventure of my life. I'm moving to Paris. I am a fearless coach and a soul guide here to inspire you as I navigate all things spiritual in the greatest city in the world, Paris. After spending a year tackling my fears at 40, I learned that everything that we truly desire and who we came to be is on the other side of our fear. Life gets to be as fun and miraculous as you dream it to be. So what are you waiting for? Let's begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Fearless Lady Podcast. This is a very personal, very vulnerable, very, I suppose, raw episode because I'm going to be sharing sort of the journey that I've been going on for the past 2 years that I've chosen to take. This is sort of my great fearless experiment. And before I jump into it, I want to read a quote that really kind of encapsulates the essence of this journey and why I decided to take it. And it's by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And it goes like this. We must be willing to let go of the very thing that we used our whole lives to get what we want in order for something greater to occur. Up until about 2 years ago, I always felt like I was living sort of this parallel universe life, meaning there was a version of myself that was already living her extraordinary life, right? Like so abundant, so successful, doing work in the world that really mattered, feeling alive and free and all of those things. And maybe you have felt this way as well. But for some reason, I never felt like I was able to achieve that or to become that. It felt like I was always chasing something outside of me. So when I read that quote, it really spoke to me because I understood something for the first time, that it was no longer about me doing something different. I had to become someone different, something greater that I can't even in my small little mind comprehend, understand, visualize. You know, people talk about vision boards. I remember when people would tell me like, oh, I got everything that I ever wanted on my vision board. And I used to think that's so boring to me. Like, that's not what's exciting about life. What's exciting about life is the surprise, is that space of the unknown when something just like some opportunity that I could have never imagined, you know, just kind of shows up in my world, the synchronicities, the miracles, the magic. I'm talking about the higher sense, the greater sense that I cannot even put on a vision board because my small mind can't even dream that. Many of you who are listening to this know about my fearless journey, that when I turned 40, I decided to celebrate by taking fearless action for a year, stepping into all these different fearless acts that really changed my life in so many ways. But I still had questions because when I started to manifest things that it wasn't even in my thoughts, right? It just like things started to flow to me so easily and effortlessly, like opportunities, abundance, relationships, all these things started to come to me. I was afraid that it would go away, or I felt guilty that I didn't deserve it because it came so easily. And I thought to myself, why is that? Why is it that when things come easily to us, we sort of buck them away because we are so conditioned to believe that we have to work hard for something? We are so conditioned to believe that we're not worthy of the very things that are just can flow naturally to us. Now, I've always been a very positive person, and everybody that I meet always kind of compliments me on my energy and on my positivity. So I really had no understanding or idea what was hidden underneath. What was in my subconscious or even my unconscious that was somehow sabotaging my greatest success? So 2 years ago, I really was curious around my relationship with money. And I wanted to understand why my whole life I was never able to really achieve the kind of success that I had always dreamed. 2 years ago, I was sitting at a cafe outside in Paris. I had made this big dream of moving to Paris a reality, which was so exciting. I had come with a significant amount of money in the bank. So even though I I had just pivoted my business out of the pandemic to doing fearless coaching and doing soul readings and belief clearings. I was still very much building the business, right? So I had this huge chunk of savings, but I wanted to do it differently. You know, in the past, when I was a yoga teacher and an artist and even working in corporate, I had that mentality of the rat race, which is like you just keep working hard, and eventually it'll pay off and you'll receive, you know, all the rewards. And in this case, it was money and success. But I understood there's another way to live. There's a way to attract these opportunities to you just by becoming the version who already has it, becoming that version of myself who already is successful. So I'm listening to this podcast, and this woman was talking about how she tried this year experiment of what if I just lived as if all of my prayers were answered? What if I just lived as if I'm already successful, already abundant, and, you know, already taken care of? Like, what would that look like? And is this law of attraction really real? Can I just attract to me those opportunities versus working hard for them? So at the time, she was describing she was living on her grandmother's couch. And this is important because this spoke a lot about how she really was at a rock bottom. And because she was sleeping on her grandmother's couch, I was not at a rock bottom. Most people need some sort of wake-up call to wake up or to make a change in their lives. And I was just curious about this journey. I didn't realize that by saying yes to it, that I would actually be taken to sort of my ultimate rock bottom. So as she's describing, she says after about 9 months of just completely living with this belief that all her prayers are answered, she's living her most extraordinary life. Maybe she put it as her most abundant life, right? Things started to really flow to her, and she then became really successful. And I really was so inspired by that. I thought, you know what? I've never done that before. I've never just lived as if all my prayers were answered, all my needs are met. I'm already extraordinary. I'm already successful. I've never done that. So maybe that's some way, somehow, how I can actually become that version of myself that I had always dreamed, right? Where I can sort of quantum leap and finally be that version that not only can attract abundance, but who understands that I'm deserving of it. I didn't want to feel guilty for spending. I didn't want to feel guilty for attracting. I wanted to feel deserving and confident and secure. All of these things, all of these qualities that we really, really want to cultivate so that we don't actually just live as if we're still that poor person who just happens to have a lot of money in the bank. You know what I'm talking about. And you hear this all the time. You know, celebrities who become really famous really fast, but they don't have the energetic capacity to hold it, or they don't feel worthy of it. They tend to self-sabotage by, you know, becoming alcoholics or drug addicts, or even, you know, spending a ton of money because they're just not used to having it, right? I wanted to not be afraid of attracting, you know, the kind of wealth that I always dreamed of, without having guilt for spending, without having, you know, feeling like it was going to go away or somebody was going to take it from me, right? Because there's those people that are really wealthy that always have this fear that somebody's going to take it from them. I wanted to just be generous AF, you know, and just like give, because I knew there was a constant flow of money, constant flow of abundance in the universe within me and all around me. So how did I first start this journey? So I want to talk a little bit about what the hero's journey is. So we all have this choice to embark on what's called the hero's journey. And you'll see this depicted in a lot of films. Like I talked about Harry Potter, that's a hero's journey. Basically, somebody decides to leaps out on a quest that is so different from the ordinary world. And in this case, it was who I used to be and what mainstream society told me how to be successful. I was sort of like letting go of that. And they embark on this journey. And initially, what ends up happening is you're going to be met with like a lot of tests, a lot of initiations, a lot of challenges, even enemies, all of these things, because you have to really kill off the old self. And in order to kill off the old self, first of all, you have to be aware of what the old self is doing. And in my case, I didn't quite know to the extent that my old self or my subconscious or unconscious was holding so much limitation, that it was counteracting or really kind of countering every single positive affirmation I could give it, right? Certain things would flow, but for the majority of my life, I was never able to really get out of this pattern of making this certain amount of money. And here's the other thing that I wanted to really explore. I was always good, quote unquote, meaning I always paid my bills on time. I've never been evicted. I've never been, broke before. I've always had credit cards. I've had great credit scores. Like I've never, ever gotten so low in my life. In my life, I've always sort of been in the middle, where I've never gone too low and never gone too high. And this is important from what I'm going to talk about. So how did I begin this journey? I was like, well, I think I used a lot of my own intuition and really just experimented with all the tools that I knew, right? It was like, okay, well, I'm going to just connect with my future self every day in a mirror. I'm going to talk to myself as if I'm my future self. And I just started to do that every single day. And I really loved how I was feeling. And a couple of really amazing manifestations came really quickly. And this is also important because this tends to happen whenever we embark on something new. We have what's called beginner's luck. And why is that? It's to let us know, to really encourage us to continue on this new path. So when you have that big encouragement, like, oh my God, it's working, you're much more willing to persevere when tests and challenges start to show up. So what happened after the first month even? I had bookings that people just found me off of Google. I had 2 new clients that signed up with me. People were reaching out to me for, these cool events. And I was like, whoa, I was so blown away. All this good fortune and abundance was coming to me. I was like, wow, this is really working. Now, another thing I want to touch on is I started to really pay attention to what were my patterns that were keeping me where I was. So for instance, I used to transfer money from my American bank account to my French bank account. And I would do this all the time. Why? Because I live in Paris, right? And but the majority of my money was in my American account. So I thought, what if I just don't do that? And I see if the universe might create a new possibility, might flow money to me that I wouldn't have to transfer. So I had $0 in my French bank account. And I remember thinking, I wonder how I'm going to have lunch today. It was early in the morning. So I take a shower, I come out of the shower, and I'm kind of getting dressed, thinking about what do I have in my cupboards? I don't really have much. And then I get a knock at the door. I open the door and it's my neighbor who I met once, barely, right? And she's telling me, oh, I am moving out today and I have all this food that I don't want to go to waste. Would you like this food? And she gave me 2 plants. And I was like, oh my God, the universe delivered food to me, to my door. And I was like, wow. Then I'm going through my closet looking at stuff, and all of a sudden this shirt falls down right on my head. I look at the shirt. It's the shirt that I had bought for my dad that I was going to return because he didn't want it. He had come to visit me, yada, yada. And the shirt had the receipt attached to it, and it was a €30 shirt. So I can now return that shirt, get that 30 euros cash. So now I had money and food. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I really encouraged me to go, wow, there's so many ways that we block a new possibility because we're so entrained in the program. We are so used to just controlling everything. So I really was excited to see where this journey was going to take me. So after all of that, a few months pass, and what happens is I start promoting my yoga retreat. Now, in the past, I've always been successful with my yoga retreats. And what I realized is you are going to be tested by the things you're most successful at, most good at, because what's going to be dissolved is all the ways that you used to show up in lack and limitation. So how do we actually know is when things don't go our way, right? When we have failures, quote unquote, that's when we really start to see all the old stuff that was in the way. That we start realizing we were giving our power to everything outside of us. So when I wasn't receiving the success of my retreat, I had 3 people signed up. And this was a retreat that I I rented the house myself. I hired the chef. I put all of my savings essentially in this retreat because I knew I was betting on it was going to work, because the potential of it working, I would have been really successful after it, and it wasn't working. Well, that's when I started to see all the old ways, the panic, the anxiety, the embarrassment, the shame. What do I do? How am I going to get through this? All of that shit, really. And if you're coming from your abundant self, you understand that everything is here for you. So what showed up the most during that time? Well, I started to become familiar with the old programming and how I would talk to myself and how I would berate myself. So there is no other greater enemy or monster than the ego, than our own selves. It exists in our mind, and it does so because it does not want to change. Change, even if it's for the better, is so scary for the ego and the body, because don't forget, it all works together, right? Our body is a copy of our subconscious mind or unconscious mind. So it's all running together. So any sort of reaction that you change, right, when you're doing something different, it's going to, you're going to experience like a lot of resistance from the ego. So I was getting all of these pictures showing up of my past self, my music career. So I intuitively had to move through so much of that stuff to kind of heal the versions of myself where I did give up in the past. And I'm talking about my music career. I spent, a really long time pursuing it. And there was many points where I felt like I was at my rock bottom. And so what I did was, when this was showing up in this reality, even though the circumstances were different, it was a yoga retreat, I was being shown all the ways that it didn't work out for me in the past, and this was just the same way, and it's never going to work out, and I should just give up and let it go, and you're going to be broke, and you're not going to, all the things, right? I had to make a new choice. I had to actually go, wait a second, this is just the old programming trying to keep me where I am, and I'm going to continue on. Because the way the universe works, it's a universal law that there's a thing called the law of polarity, or the law of opposites, where you really want to continue so far in, like you want to lean into all of that pain, all of that fear, so much so until you break through to the other side. And the other side is the opposite, which is abundance. And it was really hard and challenging, but I did it, right? I ended up showing up to my retreat. It was amazing. You can listen to a couple of podcast episodes ago about that. But it was a huge shift for me. And I was really proud of myself and how I moved through it. And not to mention, I had an amazing time on this retreat, and so did the women, right? So it was all worth it. It was all here for me. But one of the things that came up was my biggest fear. And my biggest fear was, what if I become homeless? What if I can't afford this apartment anymore? What if I become broke, right? All of these things were kind of like swimming in the background. And I just thought, well, no, things are going to shift. I won't have to, experience that. I know that not every fear needs to be manifested. So I'm just going to continue on, and, everything's going to be fine. So I just kept affirming, talking to my future self. And then I would just try different things. I started to get really into Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I was doing his, meditations. But one of the things I want to say is that as this was happening, I was experimenting with, and this is going to maybe trigger some of you or maybe not, and I would not necessarily encourage anyone to do what I'm about to share. But I do want to share it because for me, it's important to understand that there's no such thing as good or bad. There's no such thing as negative or positive. The universe does not respond to that. It only responds to what we are giving our energy to. So you can say, I don't want to lose my home. I don't want to become homeless. But all the energy and all the universe is hearing is homeless. All the energy that you're giving is homeless. So that's why I really believe that we don't actually manifest by affirming. We manifest by being neutral and indifferent and in harmony and in flow. When you don't care, when you've given up, these are all ways things can flow through to us, because that is the actual natural vibration of creation. It is that 0 point. It is that negative space. It is the darkness. It is the unknown. That's when things can bloom. So all this time, I'm affirming against a great fear, which is being homeless or having to give up my apartment. Now, what happened was, again, getting back to there's no such thing as bad or good. When I had I had rent due, I was like, what would happen if I just didn't pay rent because I had a certain amount of savings that I was pulling money from. And I was like, what if I did the same thing I did before about not transferring money? Would money show up, right? So this was so hard for me. You're talking about somebody who has really built an identity on being a good girl. So not paying my rent on time, I've never done that in my life, ever, 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 ever. So here I was experimenting. What if I was not going to pay rent on the actual day and I was going to wait and see if a new possibility would show up? So I waited 6 days. And let me tell you, I was a nervous, panicked wreck. I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Is he going to kick me out? I'm not even in America. I'm in a totally new country. I was just so scared of what was going to happen. Guess what happened? Nothing happened. Nothing happened. I ended up breaking down and then I decided to pay rent after 6 days. I didn't give an explanation and I really wanted to. I wanted to give an excuse. I wanted to apologize. I did nothing. I just paid the rent and nothing happened. I thought, well, let me try this again. Let me wait 13 days, okay? After maybe the first 10 days, I was like, wow, did somebody else pay my rent? Because I wasn't hearing anything from my landlord. And I thought, this is so weird. And I've never done this before. And I was super uncomfortable. And then finally I get a message. And it was like the kindest message, basically saying, unless I'm mistaken, have you paid rent? I don't think you've paid rent this month. Is everything okay? Or something like that. And I was like, oh my God, of course he's like the nicest landlord ever, right? And then of course I was like, no, I'm so sorry. And then I ended up paying for the next few months because I just felt so guilty. But what was I doing? Why did I do that? I was experimenting. I said, what if I wasn't so good? What if I wasn't coloring in the lines? Would I be punished? Right? And really the only punishment was self-induced. It was all the negative chatter in my mind. And that was very clear. And the other thing that was really clear during all this time is I was receiving so many tests. You never have to worry if you're passing a test or initiation, whatever. You never have to worry because there's going to be another one, literally around the corner. They are so lined up. That's what I also learned is the patterns that I became aware of and how the universe works. You don't ever have to worry about, oh God, I freaking messed up this test and blah, blah, blah. No. Don't even worry about it because another one's lined up for you. Trust me. The common denominator through all of those tests, when something would come through and then it would go away, was how I was talking to myself. That's it. How I was talking to myself. I thought, wow, if I have this internal dialogue that is so accustomed to berating me, telling me, all it told me was how I was doing everything wrong and I should just give up. If I have that belief that I'm always doing something wrong, guess what the universe is going to give me? Many more circumstances and situations to affirm that I'm doing something wrong. Huge. I had so many clients, almost, bookings. I had this one amazing opportunity. I'm not even going to go into it because it was almost too good to be true. And I think that's why it went away because I had this moment of oh my God, it just came through so easily and all these things. And I could have never myself actually pinpointed this is a thing that I would want. And it just came to me. So this is what I'm saying. We don't realize how much we are sabotaging ourselves because we are so locked in a program. And the mind and the body are locked into it. This is important because I also, during this time, had a kundalini awakening, which if you don't know what a kundalini awakening is, it's basically we all have the kundalini at the base of our spine, right, in our first chakra. And when it gets awakened, all of that energy, this is the energy that creates the universe. Like we have this energy within us, but normally it stays dormant. It's asleep. But when you awaken the kundalini, that energy actually moves through the entire nervous system, the entire chakra system, all the way up and out through the crown center, right? Well, what happened to me was, and the reason why I think I awakened it was because during this time, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. I'm going to do Dr. Joe Dispenza's meditations, and I'm going to do a breath work, because I knew that at 4 a.m, that's that sweet spot where you're not quite awake, you're not quite asleep, and I can kind of access the subconscious, unconscious mind a lot easier. So by the second night of doing this, all of a sudden, I felt this incredible energy surge all the way up through my body, but in my heart, I swear to you, it felt like my heart was like on fire. It almost felt like an engine, like a propeller engine, and just kept spinning. And I was like, all I kept doing, or all I kept hearing myself say was like, just surrender to it, just surrender to it. Because I had watched so many videos around this, like what to do, like especially through Dr. Joe's work. And he was like, when that happens, when that energy starts to release, you just want to get out of the way and you just want to surrender. So I just kept surrendering. And I swear to you, I had visions, and I was like taken on this, people talk about out of body experience. I don't know what the hell it was, but it was like, it happened 5 consecutive nights in a row. 5 nights in a row. I mean, when I tell you, I could not wait to go to sleep because I was like experiencing this otherworldly, like it really confirmed and solidified that what I was doing was exactly what I needed to do, because I was tapping into the larger part of me that we all actually have. And it really started to make sense, like, oh my God, like this is creation. This is how you create, using this energy. Like this is, like, it was so wild. It just felt like the most extraordinary, most profound experience of my life. And I could no longer go back, right? Knowing that we are so much more powerful than we ever imagined, that I wasn't even using an ounce of this power, but I had the intuitive knowledge that it existed within me, and I wasn't able to tap into it until these moments, until this time. It did really start to feel like the deeper I went, the further my commitment was to not actually manifesting money, but actually changing, actually becoming a different person. So the level with which I was willing to go got deeper and stronger, and the confidence grew. And this will kind of let you understand what came next and why I made the decision I did. But as I said before, the universe does not hear our words. It only responds to our energy. I was then faced with the reality, oh wow, I cannot afford my apartment anymore. That I had 1 month left of rent and basically money to spend, and what am I going to do? So in April, I made the conscious decision, because you all know that coming from a choice means coming from abundance. And I understood I needed to create a new meaning around, if I was going to give up this apartment, what did I make this mean? I made it mean this was the last piece of my journey that was attached to the old self, the last piece of the journey that was attached to fear of losing. And what would actually become possible if I let this go? I knew intuitively that I would actually receive so much energy back, because I knew I was just spinning my wheels, like going against, like being so afraid that it was going to go away. And what am I going to do if I don't have a home? All of these things that I never experienced before in my life, but I understood it was a good thing. I understood it was here for me. So, because the past self would have probably just Airbnb'd my apartment, because I live in a great area. I could have sublet. I could have done so many things to make money off of it and lived off it, like so many people do. But I was like, no, I'm doing the scary thing. I'm going to let this place go. Do I not think I can get another apartment? Do I think this is the only home that I can ever receive? No, of course not. I'm already abundant. I'm already the self that's living this extraordinary life. This has to go. It made sense to me. So I gave my notice. I told no one. And this is important too, because we have to remember boundaries. And I knew I did not want to, I knew it wouldn't make sense. It's not going to make logical sense to anyone And I didn't want to be talked out of it, or I didn't want to be influenced by anybody else. I just knew, I knew it was the perfect and right choice for me. I knew it was about, this is actually the moment that I really give up and surrender. Like, I am willing to give up my whole life, my apartment, my things. I don't give a shit, because I know on the other side of it is my greatest expression, is my greatest extraordinary life. And so, yes, I'm willing to give it up. Who cares? No big deal. This is temporary. That's the space I was in. After I gave notice, I was dancing. I felt like I just given up a corporate job. It was wild. I was like, wow, that's how you know you were holding so much fear around this thing. Because when you actually do the thing that you're most afraid of, you get all of that gorgeous energy back. And I felt the most alive that I hadn't felt in years, and like the whole time, this whole journey, because I was like, wow, I was vibrating so much on the fear of losing it, that when I finally gave it up, I felt so free. I felt so free. So what did I do? I sold everything quietly. I found a place that can keep some of my stuff in storage. And then I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And I had not been home in a year. And I was getting a lot of like my parents asking, when am I going to come home? And I thought, well, I could go home for like a month and kind of check in, because you know that you really know your true self and the work that you've been putting in when you show up with family. Like, that's how you know if it's all bullshit or not, because all of your old triggers start to show up with family. So I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to really see if all of this inner work was working. I mean, I knew it was, but boy, was I going to really get it if I go home. And I made a choice not to say anything. It was a boundary. This is my choice. I'm an adult, and they don't need to know. So, because in my mind, as I was packing things up, and it was emotional, I'm not trying to say I didn't fall back 50 times, because I was very scared. I was stepping right into the unknown, into the darkness, into a place I've never been before in my life. I kept saying to myself, you are packing up and moving into your dream home, into your dream life. That's what you make this mean. Every time it got hard, I just kept saying that to myself. So I decided to go home, and it was probably the best experience that I've had home in a really long time. I could not even describe to you how well it went. Nobody questioned. Normally when I come home, everybody's concerned, like, how's the business going? Do you have clients? Nobody questioned it. No one. It was amazing. So I had this incredible experience of being at home, and I had to bubble up against a lot of stuff, because money and certain situations were limited. And then I had to really sit with all of that fear. And my thing was not about reacting the same old way, right? It wasn't about me asking at all for help. It was about me knowing that I'm attracting exactly what I needed in each moment. So if I only have this amount of money in my accounts, then it's here for me. That's how I approached all of it. And I had to bubble up against the old self that was afraid that this was going to continue on. This was my new life. I was never going to actually change, and blah, 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 all that shit, right? So when I decided to book the ticket back to Paris, I made no arrangements for where I was going to sleep or anything. I was like, I want to create a new possibility, so I don't want to get in the way by planning anything the way I used to. Normally I would set up some sort of sublet or get an Airbnb. I was like, no, not doing it. So I show up at the airport. And now, mind you, it was 2 days before my birthday. So there's also a lot of emotion around birthday, right? Turning another year. I'm arriving in Paris. This is all new. I'm tired too. It's a 10-hour flight from LA to Paris, right? So I remember getting to the airport and going, oh my God, what am I going to do? I have no place to go. Nobody knows that I've left my apartment. What am I doing, right? All of that. I remember going to the bathroom and going, you know what? You just need a safe place to sleep. So I booked a hotel. I go to the hotel, and I remember taking a shower, and I sat in the shower as the water just poured over me, and I started to cry, so scared. Because the reality hit me oh, the hard thing wasn't just giving up the apartment. This is now the hard part, because this is all the unknown. I have never lived like this before in my life and in another country. And how am I going to, like, what am I going to say? What do I, all of this was like, the mind just goes on. And I just fell right into it. And it was beautiful because I needed to feel through those feelings. So the next day I just very casually started to look for sublets, but nothing too crazy because let me just tell you, there is a lot of history of looking for an apartment. I lived in New York for 13 years and I was, bouncing around, and there were many times where I was so frustrated trying to find a place and I was like scrounging and asking everybody. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that this time around. I want to only be in a space of abundance, of like peace when I look, because I know if I just keep taking that energy and creating from that energy, I'm just going to keep getting the same. And this was about new, creating something that I can't even imagine is possible, right? So I casually look, I go to see a friend, I'm like, la la, everything's fine, no big deal. And then I decide to, like, it was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 o'clock, and I was like, I have to find something, right? So I found an Airbnb that took me last minute. I arrive at the Airbnb, the guy's showing me around, and it turns out nothing is clean. There's no sheets on the bed. And I was like, oh my God. Now I start to really like get annoyed and angry. And the guy was like, no problem. We can have somebody come, But it's late at night and I'm so tired. And my birthday is the next day, by the way. So there's all kinds of story going on. And he leaves and I'm on the Airbnb, support. And they're just like, well, we can get somebody in, but it's late. No, the host is not responding. And then I just had this moment of like wanting to break down. Like I can't believe this is happening again. Why is this happening again? In that old space. And then I paused and I said, I know that the change is not outside of me. I know the change is within. I know I am the miracle. So I just need to shift out of this within and not expect the outside to change. So I got into this whole state of like, it's okay. I have this place tonight. So what? There's no sheets on the bed. I have a suitcase full of clothes. I can sleep on my clothes. I can go to the store. I can buy some cleaning stuff. It's not a big deal. I can deal with this tomorrow. Tomorrow's your birthday. Just go to sleep. It's all fine, right? As soon as I decided that, literally Airbnb responded saying, it's really late. We'd like to offer you a hotel room to be reimbursed, and we'll pay for your cab fare there. Because I asked, I'm like, I have all these suitcases. Like, no problem. We'll reimburse for your cab, and we'll give you a 20% discount for your next booking if you choose to leave. I said, fan-fucking-tastic. So I booked a hotel. I arrive at the hotel at like 12:30. It's now my birthday. And the guy was so lovely. He's like, oh, it's your birthday. Let me give you some champagne. I was like, listen, all I want is a really great breakfast tomorrow. I'm so into the breakfast here. And he's like, no problem. So he gives me like 2 upgrades and I get this beautiful room. I mean, I was so ecstatic. And it's because I changed within. And I accepted the current reality as it was, and it was amazing. And so sometimes when you have no expectation, by the way, things can really flow easily. But because that happened so quickly, I have now a little bit of an expectation of it kind of reoccurring in that same way. And what I've learned is that it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So just let it go. I've actually learned the greatest space that we can be is in harmony and in peace, and really being indifferent to wanting anything to change. So I say all of this because, yes, I left my apartment. I am now staying actually at a friend's who is away, and she very graciously, offered my place. But these are things that were unexpected. As I've been here now for a few months, I've been slowly telling people. I don't share the whole story because why, but I just let people know, I left my apartment. I'm in this real experiment with trust and surrender with my life. I'm doing it differently. I'm exploring new possibilities, To be honest, this feels like an entirely new journey for me because the whole time I really haven't said anything to anyone. I just thought I was going to do it all on my own, like I've done my whole life. And this time around, it feels like I really am learning how to receive help from others without feeling guilty or feeling like I have to owe them in some way. Because if I don't learn how to receive or feel worthy of receiving, well, then how am I going to feel worthy of abundance, right? That's a big way that we block abundance when we don't know how to receive. So I want to out something. I really thought that this journey was just going to take me a year. And once I achieved, abundance, I was then going to share it all. And what I realized is let go of all expectations, let go of how everyone else is doing it. Part of my journey was learning to really trust my own inner guidance. And I stopped listening to people's podcasts and I stopped reading spiritual books. And I just started to pay attention to what was coming through for me. And I realized I was just trying to kind of get to the finish line because I really just didn't want to deal with the living in the opposite like I'm living right now, because I didn't value what this experience was going to give me. But I would be robbing myself of all this incredible wisdom and insight and gold if I just skipped all the way to the end. like so many of us want to do. We skip these really hard moments because we're so afraid. We think that it's going to last forever. And I'm telling you, there is so much gold where you are, but you have to choose it. You have to choose to see it. And yes, it's hard, but it's meant to be hard, because the hard is how we learn. We don't learn by reading a book. We learn when we apply it. When we apply those tools and we experiment with life. So experiment with your life. Play around, break the rules. What are rules made to do? They're to keep us locked in an old program. Like, the universe is not judging us. Nobody is judging us but ourselves. I have been journaling every single day since I started this journey, and I can't even tell you how many times that I have scrolled back to a year ago and 6 months ago and even 2 weeks ago, and I see so much growth and so much wisdom and insight and new epiphanies about this journey that it makes it all worth it. I just want to say thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I would love to do a part 2 where I answer your questions. So please let me know if anything came up for you, if you're curious about something, if you felt triggered in some way, or if you just want to say thank you and something really resonated or it's helped you along the way. I would appreciate that as well. Just let me know. If you'd like to work with me, there's plenty of ways. You can book a soul reading, or if you're interested in working with me one-on-one and doing a fearless coaching program, please check out those links below in the show notes. You can also just support me by buying me a coffee. That would be awesome as well. And I'm sending you all the love in my heart, which we now know is gigantic. Take care, everyone.